now by the former International Trade Minister and Conservative MP, Greg Hands. Greg, thank you for joining us. Now, I'm just going to quote at you a tweet we've just seen from the coordinator, the Brexit coordinator for the European Parliament, Guy Verhofstadt. He said, Brexit is not a bad April Fool's joke, but a tragic reality for all our citizens and business. It is now 5 to midnight. Today, MPs must find a compromise and stop this chaos this evening, for once voting yes instead of every time voting no. Does he have a point?
Well, the important thing is actually the real vote should be again on the Prime Minister's agreement, which we're hoping to see come back later this week.
Oh, you are hoping to see that again?
Yes, I think so. I certainly am. It's not up to me. But in terms of the tragedy comment, 34 million people participated in the UK in 2016 in a democratic process, the referendum. The turnout was very high, the highest turnout we've had on any election or referendum in 25 years. I think it's about time that people like Guy Verhofstadt started to recognise the democratic process that is involved in the UK. That is why we are where we are today. It's because of a democratic vote.
Although, of course, he would say that Europe has, it has negotiated a deal over the space of 2 year. It's just that the Prime Minister seems to have an awful lot of difficulty getting it through the House, and hence his appeal to MPs. So on there, I want to come back to what you said, though, that you expect it to come back later this week. So it was voted down once by 230 votes, a second time by 149, a third time last week by 58. Do you expect it to squeak over the line this time?
Well, that I don't know. I'm not here to make a prediction, but I do think that the best course of action now, I voted against her agreement first time round because I didn't think it was the right agreement for the UK. It's been improved. But I think the best course of action is, rather than have these series of indicative votes, is to vote for the deal that is on offer. That is the best course of action open to us.
Interesting that the Chief Whip himself, responsible for discipline for the government and the ruling party, has said that really there should have been a reassessment after the hung Parliament vote in 2017, that the government should have acknowledged that it was time for a softer Brexit. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it has been difficult. The numbers that were thrown up after the 2017 general election, which of course we did win. Labour are saying that they won it, but the Conservative Party did win the election, but we didn't get an overall majority. And that did make things very, very difficult. But we do have to think about what is the best form of Brexit for this country. The British people voted to leave, and I think the best available form of Brexit is going to be her agreement. I think it's far better than the other options, like, for example, the customs union, or like Common Market 2.0, the better option is her deal.
Well, Customs Union, that proposal by Ken Clarke, obviously on the vote last week, it didn't get a majority, but was only a handful of votes shy of that. Do you think it's going to get over the line today? And do you think it's time for you to listen to Guy Verhofstadt, go with the rest of some of your parliamentary colleagues and push it over the line?
Well, I think a customs union is a terrible idea. I'm a former Minister for Trade Policy. I published on my website, greghands.com, today, a 5,000-word essay on why a customs union is a bad idea. And effectively, UK MPs would be voting away their control over UK trade policy, a big part of our economy, to the European Commission and to MEPs. As I put it, a Latvian MEP or a Greek commissioner would have more say over UK trade policy, and this is the birthplace of free trade, than any British MP or even the Prime Minister would have. That is unacceptable.
And do you not think that in a world of giants, the United States, China, the EU, that actually on trade we might be better sliding in behind the EU and benefiting from that safety in numbers?
Well, it doesn't work like that, because actually a customs union would mean that you don't have a seat at the table. It's all very well saying the EU is a big trading bloc, but they would make decisions for us in the customs union. We wouldn't even have a seat at the table. And as I say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu.
OK, well, your position on that makes it clear you're not going to be voting for that today. Coming back to what you do want to vote for again, the meaningful vote for the Prime Minister's divorce deal, we've heard the DUP say yet again, no chance, they're not coming in behind it. doesn't that make it another attempt to flog a dead horse?
Well, look, we'll have to see. I'm sure a lot of work is being done, talking to MPs. There's various MPs who I think have the potential to vote for the agreement, not just the DUP. There's also some of the Brexiteer and indeed some Remainers in the Conservative Party and indeed Labour MPs. I think you've got the potential to vote for the deal.
And yet, you know, coming to the points you were making about trade and the difficulties of trade, there is a problem with that border in Ireland.
Well, there is, but I think that her deal is negotiated with the EU, and we know that with all of the parts of the deal that I don't particularly like, but at least it deals with the border in Northern Ireland, whereas, for example, a customs union wouldn't necessarily deal with that. So actually, the better option is actually her deal.
And just before I let you go, I need to ask you about the ill-discipline line from the Chief Whip, whose job, after all, is to enforce discipline, so he ought to have a ringside seat on what discipline looked like. I mean, you've sat in the Cabinet over recent years. What is your take on whether it really is the most ill-disciplined Cabinet in British political history? That's quite a strong statement.
Well, I've also been the government's Deputy Chief Whip in the coalition years. And look, I find it amazing from time to time that cabinet ministers are allowed not to vote for the government. I resigned from the government last year because I disagreed with an aspect of government policy, in this case the expansion of Heathrow Airport. So I disagreed, and therefore I did what I thought was the honourable thing, which is to resign from the government. And I'm amazed that cabinet ministers are allowed to disappear and not participate in votes.
Greg Hands, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the News Channel.